Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are going to continue our study of the book of Joshua with chapter 10. We have just read about the deceit of the Givonites, which we learned in chapter 9, how the Givonites were afraid of the wrath of the fellow Canaanites, who had just banded together and decided, we are not going to succumb to the Israelites. We are going to, rather than give in and sue for peace, we are going to band together and fight. The Givonites, on the other hand, wanted to make peace, and instead of openly coming to Yoshua and saying, we're ready to make peace, they came in a sneaky way. They pretended that because they were afraid of the wrath of their fellow Canaanites. This is the way we had explained it, and I'm going to continue with this theme, that the reason why they snuck was because they were afraid of the wrath of their fellows, and by not showing full faith in God and openly taking Joshua's peace overtures, that's why they ended up becoming the servants and not just becoming full-fledged gerim, converts or newbies, and people joining in. So this idea that this is what they were afraid of is further supported by what we're about to read today, because immediately what happened after the Givonites joined the Israelites, Vayehi, and it was Kishmoa Adoni-Tzedek, this is chapter 10, verse 1, when Adoni-Tzedek, the king of Jerusalem, heard Ki Lachad Yehoshua et Ai, that Joshua had conquered the city Ai by Acharima and had destroyed it, Kasher Asal Yericho Lamalka, just as he had done to Jericho, Yericho, and her king, Ken Asal Ai Lamalka, he had also successfully done so to Ai and her king. V'chi Hishlimu Yoshvei Givon es Yisrael Vayu B'kirbam, and that the people of Givon had made peace with the Israelites and were now among them, had now joined the Israelite people. Vayir'u ma'od, they were very afraid. Ki ir gedola Givon, because Givon was a large city. Ki achas arei hamamlacha, it was one of the royal cities. V'chi hi gedola min Ai, it was even bigger than Ai, and they had now capitulated. Right? V'chol anashei giborim, and they had strong, powerful men, warriors, but they still gave in and joined the Israelites. So now this Adoni-Tzedek, the king of Jerusalem, knows that he's on the list. So he went, verse 3, Vayishlach Adoni-Tzedek melech Yerushalayim, and Adoni-Tzedek, the king of Jerusalem, sent messengers El Hoham melech Hebron, to Hoham, the king of Hebron, V'el Pira melech Yarmut, V'el Yafia melech Lachish, V'el Dvir melech Eglon, Lamar, to these kings of these other towns in the region. He sent them the following message: Alu Elai v'Izruni, come to me and help me out. V'nakez Givon, let's strike down Givon. Ki hishlima et Yoshua v'et bnei Yisrael, because they have made peace with Joshua and the people of Israel. Interesting here that we see, who did he want to strike? Not let's get together and strike Joshua, which will happen, and we know that they will all end up fighting with Joshua at some point. But his first reaction is, let's strike down the Givonites. His anger was first against his own people who betrayed him. And we see that their fear was obviously justified. They were afraid that they would get attacked by their fellows, and therefore they pretended to be from somewhere else. Alu Elai v'Izruni. Okay, I just read that. Come to me and help me. This was his message. Verse 5, Vaye'asvu vayalu chameshes malchei Amorite. So 5 of the kings of the Amorites that we just listed before, which included Melech Yerushalayim, the king of Jerusalem, Melech Hebron, the king of Hebron, Melech Yarmut, the king of Yarmut, Melech Lachish, the king of Lachish, Melech Eglon, the king of Eglon, Heim v'chol machaneim, they and their entire camps, Vayachanu al Givon, and they camped against Givon, Vayilachmu Allah, and they waged war against it. Vayishlechu anshe Givon, so the people of Givon sent messengers El Yehoshua El Hamachne HaGilgal Alemar, to the main camp of the Israelites, which was in Gilgal, saying as follows: Al teref yadecha me'avodecha, do not take your hands off, keep your hands off of the situation from your servants. Alei Elenu Mer, quick, come to us. V'hoshia lanu, save us. V'yazreinu, help us. Ki nikbetzu Elenu kol malchei Amor Yoshua. All of the kings of the Amorite tribes that live in this mountainous region, they have all gathered against us. We need your help. So, Vayal Yoshua min ha-Gilgal, hu v'chol amma milchama imo v'chol giborei Achayil. Joshua went up from Gilgal with the entire nation with him, and all of the strong warriors of Israel went with Joshua to help them out. Remember, this entire Am HaMilchama beforehand was ready to kill the Givonites because of their what they viewed as treachery. But Yehoshua said, no, we swore to them by God, we're going to support them. Now they are going to war on their behalf, literally risking their lives on their behalf. This demonstrates a completely new ethic, which the people of Canaan were not familiar with. One would assume that the Canaanites, thinking that the Israelites were just like anyone else, would say, for heck, who cares about the Givonites? Let them die. It's not our interest here. We made an agreement, but the agreements are made to be broken kind of deal. But no, Yehoshua was demonstrating here that the Israelites lived by a different moral code. They make a promise, they keep the promise, even risk their lives for that. Vayomer Adonai el Yeshua, God said to Joshua, Al tiro mehem, don't be afraid of this battle of your enemies. Ki v'yodcha nesatem, I have placed them in your hand. Lo yamod ish mehem mifanecha. Not one person of them will be able to stand in front of you and stop you from this mission of saving the Givonites. Vayavo aleim Yoshua pisom. Joshua suddenly appeared. Kol halayla olam min Gilgal. They marched all night through Gilgal. They surprise attack. They did not expect them to come. A, because they snuck through the night, and B, because they didn't expect Joshua to come to their aid. So this was a surprise on top of a surprise. Vayihumeim Adonai lifnei Yisrael, and they became all panicked in front of the Israelites. Vayakem Maka Gedola b'Givon, they struck them down a huge defeat in Givon. Vayirdefeim derech Male Beit Choron, and he chased the enemies as they retreated down the road of the Beit Choron, of the ascent towards Beit Choron. Vayakem ar Azekah v'ad Makeda, and kept striking them until they reached the place of Azekah and Makeda. Vayihi benusa mipnei Yisrael, and it was when they were running from the Israelites. Heim b'morad Beit Choron, they were on the descent from Beit Choron, so they had ascended it, and now they're descending. And from the heavens, there were stones falling from the sky. Now this may have been hailstones, like they got stuck in a storm, and Vayamusu, and the hailstorms were huge, or this could have been rocks, maybe from an avalanche, but somehow a natural disaster occurred. Of course, directed by God's intervention, and they died by these stones. More of them died by the hailstones than so here it seems clear that it was hailstones of ice which were killed by the Israelites by sword. So more were killed by this natural disaster than killed by the battle. So this is all ongoing, and this huge battle is happening, and then we have this next verse, which is a very famous occurrence, the occurrence of the sun standing still. So here the battle is ongoing, hailstones falling from the sky on the enemies. The enemies are still retreating, but they're not yet completely defeated. So Oz and Yoshua knew that if as soon as the sun sets and it becomes dark, the enemy will be able to find cover, find places to hide overnight. In those days, battle at nighttime was not really possible. So and then by the next morning, there's a chance that at least some of them could regroup and attack and counterattack the Israelites. But at this point, Yoshua knew that they were all panicked and running and getting slammed by stones and so on, and he wanted to finish them off before they had a chance to regroup overnight and attack back. So Az yidaber Yoshua l'Adonai, and then Yoshua spoke to God, made a request of God. When did he do this? On that day that God placed the Amorites Lifnei Bnei Yisrael in front of the Israelites. So God had placed the Israelites to dominate over them in battle. Vayomer Le'eni Yisrael, and he said in the eyes of all of Israelites, Shemesh beGivon dom, may the sun stand still in Givon, v'yoreach be'emek Ayalon, and may the moon stand still in the valley of Ayalon. Because Joshua didn't want the day to end prematurely. He wanted the day to last until the battle could be completed. Vayidom Hashemesh, and the sun stood still, v'yoreach hamod, and the moon stood still, ad yikom goy oivav, until the nation would avenge against its enemies. Halohi kesuva al sefer hayashar, behold, this is written in the sefer hayashar, the book of the upright. Vayamod Hashemesh, this event is recorded by Amod Hashemesh b'chatzi hashamayim, and the sun stood in the middle of the sky, v'lo atz lavo kiyom tamim, and it did not continue to set for an entire day, so it held in its place for an entire day. V'lo hayok kayom mahu lefanavu la'achrav, and never had this ever occurred, such a thing occurred before it or after it. L'shmoa Adonai b'kolish, that God should listen to a man's request, Ki Adonai nocham Yisrael, because God is waging war for Israel. So remarkable things here. First of all, according to its simple reading, there was clearly excuse me, this miracle was obviously an incredible miracle. So that's one remarkable thing, that the sun stood still. And the other thing that the Torah that the prophet is emphasizing here is that it was at the request of Joshua. God asked Joshua to perform this miracle, and God listened, which is very remarkable, because until this point, the miracles that have occurred, God had offered them, so to speak. Every miracle we've read about in Joshua so far. How did Joshua even know that God was going to listen? He said this in front of all the people. He was taking quite a risk by asking God to perform this incredible miracle. And the other thing is that the nature of this miracle is quite astounding for for those of us that are familiar with the basic astronomy. The sun standing still, meaning the earth stopping to rotate and so on. Just imagining the ramifications of that is quite mind-boggling. But it's a miracle, so miracles are miracles. We don't necessarily understand them. I do want to mention here that those that follow the school of Maimonides and attempt to minimize the miraculous nature of the rationalists, so to speak, rationalist Jewish philosophers who believe in minimizing the supernatural events and trying to explain them in a natural way, actually understand this very differently. Most notably, the Ralbag, also known as Gersonides, who explains that the miracle that happened here was not that the sun actually stood still. What happened here is that the battle was so strong, and the battle was so was so swift and so complete that what in the normal circumstance would have taken another complete day, right? They were able to complete it while the sun was still standing still. In other words, while the sun was still in the sky. So the miracle was a much less miraculous event. A miracle that's a miracle in the sense that it was astounding, but not in the sense that anything particularly miraculous happened. Everything that happened, it was just that when Yehoshua was standing up and praying to God, he was saying, for example, let it be as if the sun is standing still. In other words, we're seeing that this battle is taking place in such a way. In other words, yes, there's a miracle, but the miracle is like we see all the time around us. People do incredible things, which are miraculous in the sense that they defy what we would expect to happen. But they're not miraculous in the sense that the laws of nature have been completely changed. And that's how the rationalists look at this story. I wanted to mention that I personally tend towards this type of approach, but But on the other hand, the simple reading of the verse is exactly as we read it, which is that this miracle happened and the sun stood still, which is the Talmudic tradition and the simple understanding of these verses. And also, I do need to mention the identity of this Sefer HaYashar, this book of the upright. It's not exactly clear what is this Sefer HaYashar. What is this book of the upright? There is it is mentioned in Shmuel, in the book of Samuel as well. We'll get there one day. This book, exactly what it is not clear. I'm going to go with the pshat, with the explanation of Avram ibn Ezra, another one of the medieval commentaries, who generally takes also a more rationalist type approach, just like Gersonides. He's a member of that school, but he explains that the Sefer Yashar is referring to a book which was part of the corpus of literature of the Jewish people, but just did not end up getting recorded in the incorporated in the corpus of Tanakh and incorporated in the canon, so to speak, of the Jewish Bible. So the Sefer Yashar has been lost to us. The only thing we know are the references to it here in Joshua and in the book of Samuel, but it was a book that the people then would have been familiar with, as it was a book in which clearly it appears that events were recorded. And we see this many times. Sefer Milchamot Hashem, which is mentioned in Bamidbar, the book of the wars of God, and so on. There's other books mentioned throughout the Bible, which are books that people then knew of, but weren't necessarily were never placed into the Bible, so they have been lost to us today. Thank you so much for studying Joshua 10a. Because this is a very long chapter, and we studied a lot of interesting ideas today together, I'm going to divide this chapter in half, and we'll do 10b next time together.